Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into the choking, narrow streets of New York's notorious Five-Point slum. Just after dark, in the 1800s. The lamps are barely lit, the air is heavy with coal smoke and sweat, and you're already questioning your life choices. The alleys seem to shift and slither with movement in the shadows, and if you don't watch your step, you'll slip in something you'd rather not identify. You probably won't survive this night, let alone a full day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments your city and what time you're listening from. I love seeing our little global map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push deeper into the 5 points. The air is so wet, it feels alive, like it's pressing against your face. Water seeps through cracked cobbles, mixing with horse dung and kitchen scraps in sluggish rivulets. A rat darts past your foot. You yelp, but the crowd doesn't care. Everyone here is in their own miserable rush, shoulders hunched, heads down. It's not the New York of fancy parlors or gaslit theaters. This is a place they don't show on postcards. If you were hoping for a romantic city stroll, you're about 50 blocks off. In fact, you're in what some call the most dangerous neighborhood in America. The buildings here loom like crooked teeth, 5 or 6 stories if you're generous, and they lean precariously over the alley. You catch the creak of rotting beams above. They look like they might simply collapse if you breathe too hard. In places, whole walls have already fallen in and been patched with scavenged wood. As you trudge along, the smell hits harder: boiled cabbage, stale beer, and worse things. One local preacher memorably described it as a reeking pestilence. The air seems to cling to your clothes, warning you you'll never quite wash it out. Children dart between legs in ragged clothes, shouting in languages you don't understand. You sidestep two who are brawling over a scrap of bread. Their mothers watch from stoops, eyes sunken, arms crossed in defeat. Even at this hour, people are awake. Nobody sleeps well here. Above you, an open window reveals a family crammed into a single room. Flickering candlelight catching faces like a Caravaggio painting, except less glamorous and more tuberculosis. Mainstream historical accounts note these tenements sometimes held 30 or 40 people per floor, with little ventilation. But historians still argue whether the worst buildings were truly as overcrowded as reformers claimed, or if some descriptions were sensationalized to shock polite society. You're jolted back to the street when a drunk man slams into you, snarls, and stumbles on. A woman leans out of a second-floor window and empties a bucket. You pray it's just water. It isn't. One quick joke: if you survive tonight, maybe you'll open a cologne shop called 5 Points No. 5. Eau de Chamber Pot. You veer onto Cross Street, one of the main arteries. At this hour it's teeming. Lantern sellers hawk their wares. Men in battered coats argue politics, fists twitching, insults flying. A fiddler plays something Irish and raucous. A cluster of laborers stomp in time, forgetting themselves for one blessed moment. The 5 Points gets its name from the weird intersection of streets here, forming roughly 5 corners that spit you out in all the wrong directions. It's a cartographer's nightmare, like the roads were laid by a drunk with a broken compass. And everyone is here: Irish immigrants escaping famine, free black New Yorkers seeking work, German newcomers, even a few old Dutch families clinging to decaying townhouses they can't afford to fix. The result is a cultural stew that's vibrant but also permanently on the verge of boiling over. You feel that tension in the way people stare you down, not the friendly curiosity of a neighbor, but a cold, measuring glance. Are you a mark, a threat, an ally? It's a survival calculation. Just then you see a local trying to sell half-burned candles and some stale bread from a splintered crate. He eyes you hopefully. You shake your head. He mutters something that's either a blessing or a curse. Further on, a building door slams open and a couple staggers out mid-argument. She's waving a broken bottle. He's screaming nonsense. A crowd forms, some egging them on, others ignoring it like it's nothing. One fringe historical tidbit says the 5 Points even drew early slum tourists, wealthy folks who'd hire guides to show them this den of iniquity for thrills. Imagine paying extra for this immersive experience. Airbnb would have had a field day. You realize you're walking faster without meaning to. Because here, the dark isn't just empty, it's watchful. Every alley mouth seems to hold a pair of eyes. You hear snatches of laughter, a baby crying, the slap of running feet, and somewhere behind you, a scream. You don't turn. Instead, you press on. You have to see it all tonight. You pass a church, its walls pocked with grime, steps crumbling. Once it was grand, now it's a barely functioning mission hall. By the door, a barefoot boy leans against the wall, trying to keep his eyes open. He's maybe 6. His mother isn't in sight. You glance back down the street, realizing just how many people are milling about with nowhere else to go. The city was supposed to be the land of opportunity, but here, opportunity feels like a cruel joke. And the thing is, this is the best part of the night. Later, when you try to sleep in your rented cot or on the floor of a boarding house, the noises will continue. Fights, sobbing, hacking coughs. No quiet lullabies in 5 Points, just restless, relentless noise. As you pause to take in the scene, your eye catches a blackened sign swinging in the wind. It used to read bakery, but the letters are peeling. It hasn't sold bread in years. Instead, the cellar door beneath it hosts a gambling den, barely lit, laughter and threats filtering out. You hear someone hiss at you to move along. You obey. One last joke for the road? They say you can get anything here except a good night's sleep. You shiver, clutch your coat tighter, and keep walking. You're committed now. One night in 5 Points. Just one. Because really, how hard could it be? You shuffle onward, the greasy cobblestones slick beneath your worn-out boots, and step straight into the mouth of a crumbling tenement. You didn't plan on going inside, but the crowd outside is thick as flies on a carcass, and you need breathing room, even if it means inhaling air that feels like the inside of someone's lungs. Inside, the stairwell sags like an old man's spine. Every tread creaks under your weight, threatening to betray you with a sharp crack. The walls drip with moisture that can't decide if it's condensation or sewage backwash. In the dim lantern glow, you see mold crawling up the plaster in dark fuzzy constellations. You hear a hacking cough from behind a door. It's relentless, wet. You imagine whoever it is doesn't have long, and they know it. Another door stands ajar to reveal a family of 7, crammed into a single room. 2 adults, 5 kids, all trying to find floor space. One of the kids is asleep, mouth hanging open. The other's wide-eyed and feral, watching you like you're an intruder in a wolf den. Mainstream records tell us these tenements were designed originally for single families, but subdivided again and again, until every room was a rentable coffin. But historians still argue whether landlords deliberately built them badly from the start, or if greed simply corroded them over time, transforming respectable housing into vertical graveyards. You try not to inhale too deeply as you pass. The odor is a layered horror: old stew, unwashed bodies, chamber pots that have nowhere to go. You might joke that it's ode to 5 Points, but you'd gag before you could bottle it. You keep your hand on the wall for balance, but instantly regret it as something cold and slimy squelches between your fingers. You grimace and wipe it on your coat, which is probably ruined anyway. A woman pushes past you, balancing a rusted pot. She doesn't even look at you. She's laser-focused on getting water from a shared pump outside before the line gets too long. You wonder if she'll boil it or just roll the dice on cholera tonight. And the ceilings? You're forced to duck under exposed beams strung with laundry that never fully dries. Shirts and underthings drip a sour, rank water onto your head. It's like being inside a sponge left out in the rain. One old man is trying to light a fire in a tiny stove that looks ready to explode. Sparks spit and catch on his threadbare blanket. He stamps it out with muttered curses. A baby wails somewhere nearby. A cat yowls in reply. You reach a landing that seems more like a swamp than a floor. Someone's attempted to lay boards over a persistent leak. The boards float. You pause for a moment, trying to catch your breath, listening to the building settle around you with ominous pops and groans. They say some of these tenements collapse outright. A reformer once counted over 100 people crammed into one building and remarked they'd be safer sleeping in the street. One light joke? Honestly, the street might have better ventilation. Past another door, you see a man sitting with his head in his hands, face hidden, rocking slightly. His boots are worn through at the soles. He's given up on moving. You wonder what his story is. Irish famine refugee? Former skilled tradesman who can't find work? Drunk too often to keep a job? It doesn't matter here. Everyone is flattened into the same mud. You squeeze sideways through a tight corridor so narrow you have to turn your shoulders. You catch a woman's glare as you nearly knock her basket of gray, soggy bread onto the floor. She hisses something in Gaelic or maybe Italian. It's impossible to tell in this Tower of Babel. The walls themselves seem to sweat. They're thick with mildew and old newspaper glued over cracks in a losing battle against drafts. Kids have scraped the paper off in patches to reveal the bruised lath beneath. You finally reach another set of stairs, these even more treacherous. Someone's rigged a rope banister that's black with grime. You hesitate but grab it anyway, because falling here would mean landing in someone's chamber pot runoff. Halfway up, you hear shouting above you. A man and woman are fighting, something about rent, something about drink. The words are slurred, wet with tears or booze or both. You duck your head and hope it doesn't spill onto you. Another fun tidbit? There were reports of tenants being locked in at night to prevent them skipping rent. Imagine paying for a room that might double as a prison cell. Landlords called it protection from crime. Historians still argue whether that was widespread practice or lurid journalism. You reach the top floor, heart pounding. The heat is worse up here, trapped under the sagging roof. Families sleep head to toe, no privacy, clotheslines strung above their bodies like a grotesque puppet theater. You see one woman changing a baby's swaddling while older children avert their eyes. The window is stuck open a few inches, letting in a sliver of city noise. A drunk singing, a police whistle, the dull clop of horses. Even that thin breeze is a mercy. But don't relax yet. You have to get back down. And you know you can't stay here tonight. Not unless you want to share floor space with 20 strangers and a thriving community of bedbugs. You start your descent. Careful now, those steps are damp. One slip and you'll break your neck. Past a door, a man is snoring so loudly it rattles the wall. Someone shouts at him to shut it. A baby starts crying in protest. As you get closer to ground level, you realize there's even more noise outside now. The street is alive, if that's the word for it. Screaming matches, sellers shouting their prices, a fiddle scraping something that might be music if you squint your ears. When you finally emerge from the tenement, you gasp, drawing in the cool night air. Then immediately regret it, because the street smells only marginally better. One last look over your shoulder. The building seems to leer at you. It's more organism than structure. Growing, rotting, breeding misfortune. And you have to wonder how anyone survives it for more than a night. You slip back into the street only to discover the stench is somehow worse here than inside that collapsing tenement. The narrow lanes funnel every foul thing into a stew so ripe it practically has teeth. You wrinkle your nose, but there's no point trying to escape it. It's in your hair, your clothes, your lungs. You edge around a large, ominous puddle in the middle of the street. Don't look too closely. That's not rainwater. It's likely overflow from the neighborhood's notorious privies, those rank backyard pits that pass for toilets around here. Some of them are full to the brim, thanks to owners too cheap or too absent to pay for pumping. When it rains, they flood. And when they flood, well, welcome to 5 Points, where the sewer system is basically hope it flows somewhere else. You tiptoe along the broken cobbles, trying to stay on higher ground, but that's an impossible dream. The whole area is low-lying, built over what was once a pond filled in with trash. A mistake from day one. Imagine building your new dream neighborhood over an ancient garbage dump that doesn't know how to stay buried. Your foot lands with a wet splat anyway. You try not to think about it. Really, you can only laugh at this point. 5-point spa, you mutter. Foot treatments you'll never forget. You're not alone in your misery. A mother clutches her child's hand, hissing at him not to wander. He's barefoot, of course, feet black with muck. She's scolding him about cholera like she can keep it at bay with motherly threats. Because cholera is the true boogeyman here. It strikes without mercy, spreading via this very filth you're trudging through. In a single outbreak, hundreds can die in these cramped blocks. Coffin makers do roaring business, while city leaders argue about who's to blame. Mainstream historical accounts confirm repeated cholera epidemics tore through 5 Points in the 19th century. But historians still argue whether the city truly tried to fix the sanitation problem, or just blamed the immigrants for being dirty. You see a municipal pump standing in the street like some cruel joke. The handle is slick with grime, and the puddle around its base is a breeding ground for every disease known to man. A line of women waits to fill battered pails, pretending they don't see the rat scuttling nearby. One of them catches you staring and barks. "What's your problem?" You shrug, trying to look apologetic. You'd help her carry the water, but you're not sure you wouldn't just fall over in it. A little further down, you pass an open gutter that's doing its best impression of a river. Suspiciously lumpy, brownish water flows slowly toward nowhere in particular. You try to keep the nausea at bay. There's no official sewer system worth bragging about. Instead, it's a haphazard web of drains that clog constantly, if they even connect to anything. Every so often, the city sends workers to clear them out, if there's enough public outcry. Otherwise, let it rot. One local kid sees you dance around a pile of refuse and yells, "Watch your step, fancy." He laughs so hard he wheezes. You consider applauding his comedic timing, but you're busy checking your boots for unspeakable goo. You pass by what looks like a wooden outhouse in the middle of a yard. The door swings open to reveal a dark pit so full it's practically level with the seat. Flies buzz in thick clouds. Someone has tried sprinkling lime to keep the smell down. It hasn't worked. You catch sight of another privy behind a boarding house. This one has collapsed completely, forming a little lagoon of horror. A woman is standing nearby, arguing with her landlord about repairs. He's explaining that it's not his problem. She's explaining that her children are getting sick. Nobody's winning. And it's not just the privies. You see rotting food waste piled up against walls, waiting for a rag picker or scavenger to decide it's worth grabbing. Dogs and rats squabble over bones. The smell is physical. It has weight, presence, attitude. A fringe tidbit? Some residents, desperate for any kind of sanitation, tried hanging buckets of carbolic acid-soaked rags in their windows. Didn't do much, but it smelled strong enough to make you forget about the sewage for a minute. You keep moving, nose buried in your sleeve. Every so often you catch a breeze that seems cleaner, and you savor it greedily before the next wave of rot hits. You think about how anyone survives this, how they manage to raise kids in these conditions. How they get up every day and haul water, sweep floors that are never clean, and try to avoid getting cholera, dysentery, or worse. You see a man squatting by the gutter, trying to scrape it clear with a bent piece of metal. You ask why he bothers. He spits and says he doesn't want the rats coming in at night. He laughs without humor, and you move on. You remember reading that these problems weren't unique to 5 Points. Many cities at the time were filthy beyond modern belief. But here, the density of poverty makes it apocalyptic. And city officials? They tour the neighborhood and make shocked faces, then go back uptown to clean parlors and safe beds. Historians still argue whether they were willfully blind or simply overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. You're nearly gagging now as you round a corner and find the worst blockage yet. A mound of household trash, animal carcasses, and human waste dumped because there's nowhere else to put it. 2 kids pick through it looking for rags they can sell. You want to tell them to stop, to run away. But where would they go? Instead, you keep your head down, stepping gingerly through puddles that bubble with something best left unexamined. One last joke as you sigh. If 5 Points had a motto, It'd be, we put the U in sewer. You force a breath through your teeth, wipe your brow with a grimy sleeve, and prepare to see what other delights this street has in store for you tonight. Because you're not even close to done. You keep your head down as you weave through the narrow lanes, but it doesn't matter. Someone's always watching. A flicker of movement in an alley catches your eye. You turn quickly, heart jumping, only to see a couple of teenage boys leaning against the wall, arms folded, faces set like granite. They don't move, they just watch you. You swallow hard and keep going, but their eyes follow you the whole way. Welcome to 5 Points, where the gangs don't need uniforms to let you know you're on their turf. You hear quick footsteps behind you. You turn, startled, but it's just a kid sprinting past, clutching something to his chest. A bottle? A purse? He doesn't even glance back. Someone yells after him, cursing in a thick brogue. But nobody gives chase. Around here, if you're robbed and you can stand afterward, you're considered lucky. You hug your coat tighter, trying to look like you have nothing worth stealing. That's half the art of survival here. Blending in so well, you're invisible. Still, you feel the street's hostility radiating from every doorway and window. This isn't the genteel city you read about in newspapers. This is a neighborhood built on tooth-and-nail survival. You pass a knot of men standing under a flickering lantern. They're talking low, heads close, eyes flicking in every direction. One of them catches your stare and raises his chin in challenge. You look away quickly. Mainstream accounts talk about the 5 Points gangs, the Dead Rabbits, the Bowery Boys, the Roach Guards. Colorful names for groups who were anything but fun. They claimed blocks as territory, fought pitched battles with clubs and knives, and even held parades to show off their muscle. Historians still argue whether the gang violence here was as apocalyptic as the newspapers said, or if the papers exaggerated to sell copies and stoke fear uptown. But you're not debating it. You're living it. Ahead, you see a man sitting on a stoop, sharpening a long, thin blade on a whetstone. He looks up, eyes glittering. He smiles slowly, deliberately, and goes back to sharpening. You give him a wide berth? A joke to lighten the mood? Maybe you could join a gang called the Mildly Annoyed Bunnies and corner the market on polite crime. But humor doesn't last here. You duck into a side alley to avoid another group of men staggering drunk, arms thrown over each other's shoulders. They're singing something unintelligible at top volume, but it's not festive, it's aggressive. The melody is a threat. You slip past a wall scrawled with charcoal symbols you don't recognize. Gang tags, most likely. This isn't art, it's a warning. A door flies open ahead of you, smacking the wall with a crack. A man bursts out, blood dripping from his nose, swearing furiously. Another man stands in the doorway, breathing hard, fists clenched. They size each other up, then the first man spits at the ground and staggers away, muttering about getting even. Nobody intervenes. Around here, you fight your own battles, or die. You think about the people who live here who aren't gang members, families, workers, kids, how they tiptoe around these predators, how they know the wrong glance can cost them their teeth or their life. You pass a woman pulling a toddler along quickly, scolding him for lingering. She throws you a glance, as if to check whether you're trouble. You shake your head slightly, trying to look harmless. She doesn't relax. She just moves faster. There's no trust here. Trust gets you robbed. Or worse, you skirt a gathering crowd in the middle of the street. Curious despite yourself, you edge closer and see 2 men circling each other, fists up. The crowd is roaring encouragement, laying bets. One man has a wicked grin, the other looks terrified but determined. You don't stay to see how it ends. A fringe tidbit? Sometimes gangs would host these fights as recruitment tests. Survive the beating, you're in. It's a bonding exercise, like an extremely unwholesome fraternity hazing. You keep going, boots splashing in shallow puddles, heart beating too fast. Every face you see is shadowed and hard. Even the kids look like they'd shank you for a coin. Another alley opens up on your left. You glance down it, just for a second. A man is pinned against the wall by 2 others, one with his hand on the victim's mouth, the other rifling his pockets. You look away, fast. Your feet carry you automatically back to a slightly wider street where the lanterns are a bit brighter. Not safe, just less immediately deadly. You pass a saloon entrance lit by lurid red glass. Two men spill out, laughing and punching each other on the arm, their cheer ugly and dangerous. Inside, the windows glow with the flicker of cheap lamps. You hear a piano pounding a discordant tune, shouts and laughter that doesn't sound friendly. Mainstream fact? Some of these bars were owned outright by gang leaders. They weren't just watering holes, they were headquarters, recruiting centers, and places to fence stolen goods. You cross the street quickly, nearly tripping over a cart piled high with barrels. The driver curses at you, whip snapping the air. You mutter an apology and keep moving. You realize you're holding your breath. You try to let it out slowly, carefully, like you're afraid even breathing wrong will attract the wrong kind of attention. Because here? That's exactly right. Another joke for yourself? Maybe you could open a gang-free cafe here. Call it Neutral Grounds. The tagline, please don't stab our staff. But you know it wouldn't last a week. You push on, the street narrowing again, walls closing in. The light fades, shadows deepen. Voices rise and fall around you like an angry sea. You think of the city beyond 5 points. The clean gaslights, the polite carriages, the salons where men in fine coats debate philosophy over wine. That city might as well be on another planet. Here, you're just prey. You pull your coat tighter and keep moving, praying you won't catch anyone else's attention tonight. Because you've got a lot more of this neighborhood to see before you can even think about leaving. You force your pace to slow as the street opens up slightly, giving you a false sense of breathing room. For a moment, you almost think you're safe, until you notice the wall of bodies ahead. A line of people, weary and broken, pressed shoulder to shoulder in the hope of something, anything, better. It hits you then how many people are here not because they want to be, but because they have nowhere else to go. This isn't a neighborhood so much as a human bottleneck, a catch basin for the world's unwanted. You edge closer, hearing scraps of language that bounce from one end of Europe to the other. Gaelic curses, German prayers, Italian lullabies. It's like a concert no one wants to attend, and no one can leave. You hear the lilt of an Irish mother soothing a baby with a song so sad it makes your chest ache. Her husband is arguing with another man about wages, which is funny because neither of them has a job. Mainstream histories describe the mid-1800s wave of Irish immigrants, starving, desperate, fleeing the Great Famine, landing here with little more than the clothes on their backs. By 1850, the 5 Points was overwhelmingly Irish. But historians still argue whether this slum was truly the worst in New York or just the most visible, an easy scapegoat for society's failures. You step aside as two men hauling battered trunks shout for space. The trunks look like they've crossed an ocean. You wonder what dreams are inside. Family Bibles, photos, cooking pots, all of it destined to be hawked for food money in a week. A German family stands huddled near a flickering street lamp, father scanning a crumpled paper for directions. He keeps glancing up, brow furrowed. You want to tell him not to bother. There's no better address in 5 Points. You see a man with dark, calloused hands handing out handbills in broken English. Work digging trenches, hauling bricks, cleaning stables. Pay, a pittance. Competition, brutal. One small joke in your head, 5 Points job fair. Come for the crushing poverty, stay because you can't afford the fare out. You sidle past a group of boys who can't be older than 10, arguing in thick brogues about who's going to stand at which corner tomorrow to sell matches. One says he'll fight anyone for the lucrative spot near Paradise Square. The others laugh, but not kindly. These kids don't go to school. They don't have shoes. They have cunning and hunger, and a willingness to steal if it means living another day. You pause to watch a woman in a patched skirt approach a vendor selling gray, greasy meat pies. She eyes them with longing, fingers the coins in her palm. The vendor sneers and shakes his head. Not enough. She hisses something in Gaelic, her face twisted with rage and despair, before pulling her child away by the arm. The child doesn't even cry. He just stares at the pies with dead eyes. You want to look away. You can't. Another vendor hawks potatoes that look half-rotten, yelling in German-accented English. He bargains in 3 languages at once, refusing to budge on price. A fight nearly breaks out when an Italian woman accuses him of cheating her. A fringe tidbit? Some reformers tried to set up model markets with fair pricing and better hygiene, but local sellers hated them. Too much regulation? The free market at work, if by free you mean freedom to sell spoiled food to the desperate. You see a rickety wagon piled with used clothes, the driver smacking the reins at his skeletal horse. The clothes are damp and reek of mildew. People still crowd around, shoving coins at him. Even a lice-riddled coat is better than freezing in the wind. Your nose wrinkles at the mixture of smells: old onions, wet wool, sour beer, sweat. It's the perfume of the immigrant crush. As you shuffle on, you're jostled from all sides. No one says excuse me. Why would they? There's no space for politeness. You notice the way people size each other up constantly. Who's new? Who's weak? Who's worth stealing from? Who'll fight back? It's not personal, it's survival. One man catches your eye, tall, gaunt, with a thick brogue. He's muttering to himself about the promise of America, shaking his head like he can't quite believe the joke. You think about Ellis Island, about the Statue of Liberty that isn't even there yet in this era, but will one day welcome millions with that famous promise. Give me your tired, your poor. Here in 5 points, that promise is more like a threat. Historians still argue whether these immigrant communities truly integrated over time or stayed permanently divided, locked in cycles of poverty. You don't have an answer, you just see the misery now. Another small joke bubbles up to keep you from crying. Visit scenic 5 points, where your dreams come to die, but at least the rent is cheap. You duck past a man hauling a cart of ashes from a nearby bakery. He doesn't see you. He's too busy not slipping on the slick, uneven stones. The cart hits a bump, spilling gray powder across the street. A boy instantly dives in, searching for unburned coal. No one stops him. You watch a family crouched in a doorway, eating from a single tin pan. The mother scolds the youngest for crying too loudly. A baby suckles at her breast, eyes blank. You wonder if they're Irish, German, black, or a mix of all 3. Doesn't matter. Misery is the great equalizer here. As you try to move on, you catch a lull in the noise, a rare moment of silence in the chaos. It lasts about 3 seconds. Then someone starts screaming at a vendor about being overcharged. Another voice joins in, then 2 more. It doesn't turn into a fight this time, but you see the potential. It's always there. You exhale slowly, the smell catching in your throat, and force your feet to keep moving. Because you can't stay here. You have to see it all. You keep trudging, the noise of the crowd behind you fading just enough to make space for a new sound: silence. Not a comforting silence, mind you, but a hollow one. You turn a corner and find yourself on a darker street where the usual chaos has thinned out. You see them immediately. Men slumped against walls, their hats pulled low, arms folded tight across empty stomachs. A few sit on overturned crates, smoking scraps of cigar they found in the gutter. They barely register you. Their eyes are dull, heavy, resigned. This is the true face of the 5 points economy. No work, no hope. You step carefully around a man lying on his side in the street. He's alive, probably. His breathing is shallow, lips cracked. A small tin cup sits beside him, containing exactly 2 pennies. A joke forms unbidden in your head. 5 points retirement plan, die in the street. You don't laugh. You move on. Mainstream accounts describe the casual cruelty of this poverty. Factories preferred hiring children because they were cheaper. Unskilled men waited for day labor jobs that might not come. Women took in laundry until their hands bled raw. But historians still argue whether the city truly tried to help with serious reforms or simply treated 5 points as a dumping ground for the expendable poor. You see a row of men leaning against a building that used to be a stable. They're waiting for a foreman to show up. He might hire 1 or 2 to haul bricks for 12 hours. The others will shuffle away when he's picked them over, knowing they'll be back tomorrow. One man spits and mutters, "Worse than the pigs." You can't argue. Nearby, you see kids playing marbles in the dirt. their clothes so thin you can see every bone in their bodies. Their laughter is shrill, forced. One snatches another's marble and runs. The others chase him, shouting. You almost smile. Almost. Because you know where these kids will be in 10 years. Those men on the corner. Or worse. A woman passes with a baby on her hip and another clinging to her skirt. She's shouting at the older child to keep up. You catch the terror in her eyes as she glances around. It's not fear of gangs this time, it's fear of hunger, eviction, the workhouse. A fringe tidbit? Some reformers tried fresh air programs, sending city kids to farms in the summer. But many parents wouldn't let them go, afraid they'd never come back. Trust was a rare currency here. You see a boy of maybe 12 selling rags door to door, his voice hoarse from calling all day. No takers. He slumps against a wall, picking at a hole in his sleeve. He looks at you. His eyes are old. You try not to hold his gaze too long. Further on, you see a woman on her knees scrubbing a stoop. She glances up, hair in her face, eyes rimmed red. She's not paid much for this. Maybe a meal, maybe a few pennies. But it's something. She doesn't stop scrubbing even as tears roll down her cheeks. You see another man shouting at a landlord over a handful of coins. He's being evicted for falling behind on rent, again. The landlord shrugs, gesturing at the street. Plenty of other tenants. It's a business, after all. Historians still argue whether landlords were truly monstrous or just part of a larger machine that chewed everyone up. You suspect the answer is yes to both. You see two women sharing a crust of bread on a stoop. One laughs weakly at something the other says. A moment of human connection in a world determined to grind them down. You stand there watching them until they notice you. Then you move on, embarrassed at your intrusion. Because really, what would you say? You pass another man collapsed in a doorway. He might be drunk, he might be dying. No one stops to check. No one can afford the time or risk. A dog noses at his coat, looking for scraps. Another joke pops into your head. Grim humor is all that keeps you sane. 5 points hospitality. Stay forever, literally. You see a sign for a boarding house, letters flaking. You peek inside and see rows of cots crammed together so tightly people can barely turn over. The smell is indescribable. The landlord sits at a table by the door, collecting pennies. No credit, no charity. Because if you can't pay, you can sleep in the street. You back out quickly. Another block, another clutch of idle men. Their faces are set like stone. No shouting, no fighting. Just waiting. Waiting for work. Waiting for something to change. You realize there's no hope here. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. And it weighs on you like the wet, cold air pressing against your chest. One last moment catches your eye before you go. A young woman in a patched dress standing by a lamppost, trying to look casual. She glances at every man who passes. You know what she's offering. You know what it costs her. You see the way she flinches when a drunk staggers too close, then relaxes when he moves on. This is work, too. The only work left when there's nothing else. And she's not the only one. You see others like her in doorways, in alleys, by saloon doors. No work. No hope. No choices. You feel your shoulders sag. You force yourself to keep walking because you have to see everything. Your boots crunch broken glass as you turn onto another street, one lined with grog shops and saloons. If you thought the smell of sewage was bad, here you get an added top note of stale beer and cheap whiskey. You cough and wave a hand in front of your face, as if that will help. The doors of these establishments swing constantly, letting bursts of raucous laughter and sour music escape into the night. Inside, you catch glimpses of men slumped over tables, clutching mugs in white-knuckled hands like lifelines. Alcohol is the lifeblood here, and the poison. You watch a man stagger out of a doorway, one hand still holding onto his mug, the other bracing against the wall so he doesn't topple. He laughs at nothing, a raw, hollow sound. Then he notices you and his face shifts into a scowl, eyes narrowing with suspicion or maybe just confusion. You sidestep him. He swears at you anyway. Mainstream histories say these grog shops sold whiskey so watered down it could barely burn. But it was cheap, and it was strong enough to numb the cold, the hunger, the humiliation. That's all anyone cared about. Historians still argue whether the blame for rampant drinking lay with the people here or with the city that gave them no other comfort. You pass by a small window where a woman with a red nose hawks something she calls gin. You suspect it's poison with a marketing plan. A couple of men shove coins at her, snatching the tin cups she hands over. One drinks in a single gulp, then coughs so hard he doubles over. You don't linger, because you see the other side of all this cheer. In an alley nearby, a man is passed out, half his body in the gutter. His hat floats in the shallow water, bobbing like a pathetic shipwreck. A dog sniffs at his pockets. Further on, two men shout insults back and forth over a card game gone bad. The table between them is a crate balanced on bricks, cards spread out, coins glinting in the lamplight. One lunges. The crate collapses. They roll in the mud, fists flying. Nobody breaks it up. One small joke you whisper to yourself. 5 points casino, where everyone's a loser. But the humor dies in your throat when you see a woman screaming from the stoop of a nearby building, clutching a baby to her chest. She's yelling for someone to help, but no one does. Her husband is on the ground below, unmoving, a bottle beside him. He's not dead, yet, but he's not much alive either. She curses him in Gaelic, then in English. She cries until the baby joins in, wailing to match. You don't know whether to go to her or run. Instead, you just keep walking, because there's more to see. You push open the door to one saloon, curiosity getting the better of you. The room is thick with smoke and sweat. A man bangs on an upright piano, the keys so out of tune they might be arranged at random. At the bar, men slump over their drinks, muttering about lost jobs, lost families, lost everything. A couple of them look up at you, eyes like glass marbles. One even tries to smile, but it's a rictus, all teeth and desperation. You order nothing. You turn and leave. Outside, you see two teenagers standing in a doorway, passing a bottle back and forth. One laughs at something, but it's an ugly, brittle sound. They're too young for this. But you realize no one here is too young for anything. A fringe tidbit? Temperance societies tried to shut these places down, marching through the streets singing hymns. The saloon owners would just wait them out, then reopen with a new sign over the door. You hear the clatter of a mug smashing. A man is being thrown bodily from another doorway, landing hard in the street. He groans, tries to get up, and collapses again. His friends watch from inside laughing. You skirt around him carefully. Further on, you see a woman leaning against a lamppost, a faded feather in her hair. She's humming tunelessly, eyes half-lidded. Her flask is empty, dangling from one limp hand. She doesn't look at you as you pass. You see the glow of another saloon sign. This one promises fine spirits in letters that have mostly peeled away. Inside, you know the spirits are neither fine nor friendly. You try to imagine this place sober, quiet, safe. It's impossible. Even if you banned alcohol tomorrow, the despair would still seep out of the ground. Mainstream accounts mention reformers who tried to offer alternatives, coffee houses, reading rooms, sober dances, but they didn't last. Not here. Historians still argue whether it was inevitable, whether poverty makes vice the only comfort. You don't have an answer. You just keep walking. Because if you stop, you might start crying. You see a man weaving down the middle of the street, it's singing some old ballad, voice cracking. He holds his bottle aloft like a torch, proclaiming his kingdom to anyone who will listen. No one does. You see the scrawled sign for another tavern. Good cheer inside. You laugh bitterly. Sure, good cheer. If you like forgetting who you are. You pass yet another fight spilling out of a doorway. This time knives flash. You turn away quickly, heart racing. No one's going to call the police. No one wants them here anyway. One last joke before you move on. 5 points pub crawl. Crawl being the operative word. You wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve, though you didn't eat anything. You just feel sick. You take a deep breath. It tastes like smoke and despair. But you're not done. Not even close. You pull away from the saloons, your ears still ringing with drunken shouts and discordant piano. The street seems to shudder under your boots, alive with tension you can't shake. But there's something else in the air tonight. An electric, crackling energy that sets your teeth on edge. Because 5 Points isn't just squalor and drunken fights. It's a powder keg. You don't need to be a scholar to see it. You can feel it in the way people move faster than usual, clutching children close, avoiding eye contact. You can hear it in the frantic whinny of a horse pulling a fire wagon at breakneck speed, bell clanging a panicked warning. You follow the sound, boots slapping wet cobblestones. As you turn the corner, a wall of heat hits you. A building is ablaze, orange tongues licking from shattered windows. Smoke billows in thick, greasy plumes, blotting the stars. Flames crackle like cruel laughter, throwing twisted shadows down the street. You stop, staring. It's not the first fire tonight. It won't be the last. Mainstream history notes that fires were a constant threat in these crowded wooden tenements, spreading fast and killing indiscriminately. But historians still argue whether landlords deliberately let buildings burn to clear bad tenants and claim insurance. You see the crowd gathered, faces lit by flickering orange. Some shout for water. Others just watch. A woman screams for her child. Someone hauls the sobbing girl from a window onto a ladder, just in time. Your chest tightens. You can practically taste the soot. Two men argue about who should help with the bucket brigade, fists clenched. Another pair just shoves each other, too drunk or angry to care that flames are consuming half the block. A man stumbles past you, singed hair smoking, eyes wide with horror. You back away, because this isn't your fight. You turn down another street, only to find it crowded with people moving in the opposite direction. They're not fleeing the fire. They're surging towards something else. You hear the first glass shatter before you see it. A shop window explodes outward, shards tinkling like a sinister wind chime. A man jumps inside, tossing goods out to waiting hands. Cheers erupt. You realize you're witnessing a riot. Because fire isn't the only thing that spreads here. Anger does too. The mob grows, feeding on its own chaos. Someone shouts about rent. Someone else screams about hunger. A woman yells that the landlord deserves it. You press yourself against a wall, trying to stay small. Mainstream accounts tell us 5 Points was infamous for riots, anti-rent protests, gang wars, nativist versus immigrant clashes. But historians still argue whether these riots were political statements or just desperate people lashing out. You watch as a man smashes another window with a brick. Another drags out a cash box, waving it overhead. Someone else punches him in the face and grabs it. No honor among thieves. You flinch as a bottle sails past your head, shattering against the wall. You move quickly. You weave between people screaming at each other in 3 languages, fists flying. Someone brandishes a broken chair leg like a sword. It's chaos. But it's organized chaos, in a way only the desperate can manage. Because they know how to riot. They've done it before. A fringe tidbit? Some gangs would actually coordinate riots as cover for looting, even negotiating temporary alliances for maximum profit. 5 Points diplomacy at its finest. You duck into an alley to escape the worst of it, heart-hammering. But the alley isn't safe either. You find a group huddled there, passing a jug between them, faces lit by the glow of the burning building. They're laughing, but it's not joy, it's relief. Because for once, they're not the ones being robbed. You back out slowly. The riot has spilled onto another street now. You hear windows breaking, men roaring like animals. You see the police trying to form a line, clubs raised, but they're outnumbered. And you can see in their eyes they don't want to be here. They're not paid enough to die in 5 Points tonight. One breaks rank and runs, others follow. The crowd surges forward, triumphant. You feel sick, because you get it. These people have nothing to lose. And tonight they're taking back a tiny bit of power, even if it's just the power to destroy. You skirt the edge of the crowd, trying to stay invisible. It doesn't matter. No one's looking at you. They're too busy looting, fighting, screaming. You see a man hauling a sack of flour on his back, chased by another waving a knife. You see a child trying to light a broken cart on fire with a stolen candle. You see 2 women wrestling over a bolt of fabric, tearing it to shreds between them. It's madness, and it's heartbreakingly human. Because what else do you do when the world gives you no way up? One last bitter joke? 5 Points. Come for the poverty? stay for the riots. You don't laugh. You keep moving. Because even though this street is on fire, there's more 5 Points waiting for you. And you promised yourself you'd see it all. You push deeper into the slum, putting distance between yourself and the riot's angry roar. The sound fades into the thick, damp hush of another street, one no less miserable, but eerily calm. You stop to catch your breath, but there's no rest here. Because everywhere you look, you see children. They're not playing, they're working, or trying to. You spot a girl no older than 7 perched on an overturned barrel, selling what look like wilted flowers. She waves one at you, her eyes huge and hollow. You shake your head, and she just shrugs, setting it back down in her basket with mechanical precision. Another kid, barefoot, pants rolled up, hair matted with grime, tries to shine a passing man's shoes. The man kicks at him and walks on, leaving the boy to spit curses in Irish too old for his mouth. Mainstream histories tell us child labor was common everywhere in 19th century America. But 5 Points was a special hell for kids. 10-hour factory shifts if you were lucky, street hustling if you weren't. Some never saw the inside of a school. But historians still argue whether reformers exaggerated the numbers to shock donors, or if they undercounted the true scale of misery. You walk carefully to avoid stepping on a kid sleeping directly on the cobbles. He's so thin, you're afraid you might break him if you touch him. You move on. A group of children cluster around a man pushing a cart full of rags and bones. They plead with him to buy their scraps, old rope, torn shirts, anything with the barest value. He shoos them off, muttering that he's got enough mouths to feed at home. One boy throws a rock at his cart. It bounces harmlessly off a wheel. The boy spits at the ground and storms away. You keep walking. Ahead, you see a girl of maybe 12 cradling a baby. She's leaning against a rotted doorframe, singing softly. The baby is silent, but you're not sure that's a good thing. She notices you staring and pulls the baby closer, glaring. You avert your eyes and move on. Because there's worse here. A small group of older boys lounges on a stoop, playing dice. One of them has a long scar across his cheek. Another is missing 2 fingers. They laugh too loudly, punch each other too hard. You see the bottle hidden between them. These aren't kids anymore. They're soldiers in training. You realize with a chill that you recognize one of them from the riot. You don't linger. A fringe tidbit? The orphan train movement actually started partly because of kids like these. Reformers rounded up street kids, sometimes willingly, sometimes not, and shipped them west to work on farms. Critics said it was kidnapping. Supporters called it salvation. You turn onto another lane and almost collide with a group of children pulling a homemade wagon. It's filled with coal scraps they've scavenged from ashes. They glare at you, daring you to take it. You back off with your hands raised. They move on. You see a boy trying to sell newspapers. His voice is hoarse, cracking. He can't be older than 8. No one's buying. He notices you looking and gives you a grin that's all teeth and no joy. Buy a paper, mister? Latest on the riots. Real cheap. You shake your head. He shrugs, turns away. You want to give him something. Anything. But you're not here to save anyone. You're here to see. You move on. You pass what used to be a school. The roof's half gone, windows broken. A sign hangs crooked over the door, letters faded beyond reading. You see a couple of boys inside, throwing stones at the walls. No one stops them. Because who cares? Education's a luxury here. Mainstream reformers tried to open schools in 5 Points. Some even succeeded for a while. But money ran out. Teachers fled. Parents pulled kids to work. Historians still argue whether the failure was inevitable or just a lack of will. You see another girl crouched by a gutter, poking at something with a stick. When you get closer, you realize it's a dead rat. She lifts it by the tail, eyes bright with curiosity, maybe even hunger. You have to look away. You see a line of children at a pump, waiting for water. They're arguing, shoving. One pushes another so hard he falls, scraping his knee on the cobbles. He doesn't even cry, just gets up, shoves back. You wonder if they even know how to cry anymore. A joke flickers across your mind, black and mean. 5 Points daycare. Teach your kids survival before they can spell it. But you don't laugh, because you see another child watching you from the shadows. Older, sharper, measuring you. You check your pockets instinctively, because the line between victim and thief here is thin as a razor. You keep moving, because if you stop, you'll have to admit how much this breaks you. You see a woman at the end of the street calling kids over to her. She's dressed a little better, hair pulled back tight. A reformer, maybe. She's handing out bread. The children swarm her, grabbing at the loaves. She tries to keep order, voice shaking. But she's not the enemy. She's the only one trying. You see one boy snatch 2 pieces and run. She sighs, wiping her brow. You catch her eye. She gives you a look that's part defiance, part plea. Do you see? You nod and move on. Because you have to see it all. You step carefully over a broken crate in the middle of the street, the remnants of someone's failed move or hasty eviction. Beyond it, you see a pair of watchmen in battered blue coats standing beneath a flickering lantern. They look as ragged as the slum around them. Hats pulled low, batons tucked at their sides, eyes sharp but disinterested. They see you too. One raises an eyebrow. You lower your gaze and keep walking, because you know better than to draw attention. These aren't kindly neighborhood guardians. They're part of the machinery that keeps 5 Points in its place. Mainstream history will tell you the New York City police in the mid-1800s were famously corrupt, an arm of Tammany Hall, that political beast that claimed to serve immigrants while bleeding them dry. But historians still argue whether the police were truly worse here than elsewhere, or just better at hiding it uptown. You hear one watchman murmur to the other, something about a bribe he's owed. You don't need to guess who paid him. Ahead, you see a saloon door swing open, releasing a warm glow and raucous laughter. A man stumbles out and straight into the arms of a waiting officer. They grin at each other. The drunk slides a coin into the watchman's palm, gets a friendly shove on the shoulder, and is told to get home safe now. You keep moving, because you can't afford that kind of protection. You turn down another street and see the glow of lanterns strung across a storefront. A grocer, technically, but half the trade is cheap whiskey and watered gin. You watch a woman slide a small packet of coins across the counter, muttering something about her husband. The grocer weighs them, sneers, and shoves her purchase at her. She glances at you on the way out. Her eyes are hard as flint, because in 5 Points, charity is something you buy. You step aside as a man hurries past, a sack over his shoulder. You notice the police badge hanging loosely from his belt. Off duty, you guess? He doesn't even try to hide the stolen loaf of bread poking out. Because here, the law is whoever can afford it. One small joke you whisper to yourself, 5 Points justice, now available for 3 easy payments. It doesn't make you feel better. You see another pair of watchmen up ahead, this time shaking down a peddler. He's got baskets of bruised fruit, nowhere else to go. They're telling him about his license, which you suspect doesn't exist. He fumbles for coins. They take them without blinking, and walk on. You catch the peddler's eye for a second. He doesn't look angry. He looks relieved, because they didn't take everything. You keep moving. You pause as you reach Paradise Square, that open space where 5 streets spit you out at odd angles. It's not paradise. It's a mud pit, churned by boots and wagon wheels, half lit by guttering lamps. But it's the heart of 5 Points, and it's crawling with the city's underbelly. You see politicians leaning against wagons, sleeves rolled up, shaking hands with men they'd arrest tomorrow. You see Tammany Hall runners scribbling notes on who to pay off next election. Mainstream fact? Tammany didn't just rule New York, they thrived on 5 Points votes. They'd buy drinks, hand out coal, promise jobs, then come back to collect on election day. Historians still argue whether Tammany was a devil's bargain that helped immigrants or a parasite that kept them poor. You watch a man in a well-cut coat hand out coins to a cluster of Irishmen. They tip hats, mutter thanks, and scuttle off. He lights a cigar, smirking, because generosity isn't free. It's an investment. A group of kids runs past you, shouting something in Irish. You catch Tammany in there. They laugh as they go, because even they know who runs the show. A fringe tidbit, Some Tammany men even paid gangs to break up rival rallies or persuade voters. Voting early and often was a 5-point specialty. You circle the square carefully, avoiding the clusters of men talking low, deals being cut in the open. You see a policeman taking notes, but you know it's not for the report. It's for the boss. You skirt the edge of a building plastered with handbills, missing children, political slogans, offers of reward for runaway servants. Most are faded beyond reading, like promises. You see a woman selling roasted chestnuts on a brazier, the smoke curling into your nose. She looks at you warily. You don't have the heart to bargain. You toss her a coin. She nods once, eyes wary, because she knows there's no favors here. You move on, past a doorway where a man in a battered suit is loudly proclaiming he can get you work if you pay up front. A couple of desperate souls listen. You keep walking. You see a saloon door open. The noise spills out. Laughter, a fiddle scraping something that might be music. You see the watchman inside, hat off, mug in hand, roaring along with the song. You shake your head, because of course. One last joke before you go. 5 points law, now with 50% more corruption. It doesn't help. You sigh, pulling your coat tighter against the damp. Because you're not done yet. You have to see it all. You leave Paradise Square behind, though the noise follows you like a curse. Your path narrows into a crooked street that seems less like an actual road and more like a dumping ground for anything that won't sell uptown. The smell hits you first. A cloying mix of spoiled cabbage, old blood, and the sour tang of too many unwashed bodies crowded too close. Because here's the market, if you can call it that. You step carefully around a pile of fish heads, buzzing with flies. A woman in a ragged shawl waves you over, gesturing at her wares spread on a piece of burlap. Wilted onions, bruised apples, and something unidentifiable in a cracked bowl. Cheap, she croaks. You shake your head and move on. But she's not offended. She barely notices. Because everyone here is selling, and no one is really buying. Mainstream histories describe 5 points markets as chaotic, improvised spaces where vendors sold anything they could find or steal. The city tried to regulate them, but it was like trying to hold water in a sieve. Historians still argue whether the markets were a vibrant symbol of immigrant hustle or just another layer of misery piled onto a slum. You pass a man selling second-hand boots with holes in the soles. He slapped bits of tin over the gaps, pretending they're good as new. Next to him, a girl holds up handfuls of rusted cutlery, insisting it's real silver. A joke forms in your mind. 5 points antique market. Guaranteed authentic garbage. But you don't laugh, because the desperation here is palpable. You see 2 men haggling over a slab of meat so gray you can't tell what animal it came from. One finally hands over his coins, scowling. He shoves the meat into a greasy sack and shoulders past you. You watch him go, wondering how many mouths he has to feed. You edge around a man with a cart piled high with rags and bones. He bellows his wares, voice hoarse, eyes bright with fever. Rags for paper, bones for glue. He doesn't care who buys. He just needs to sell. A fringe tidbit? Rag pickers were essential to the city's economy, collecting trash to be repurposed into paper and other goods. But in 5 points, it was often kids and the elderly who did the work, rummaging through filth for pennies. You see them here too. Small children, dark between stalls, eyes sharp for anything that might be dropped or forgotten. One girl lifts a wilted cabbage leaf and eats it raw. No one stops her, because it's hers now. You keep walking. The butcher's stall is next, more like a table with an old cloth over it. Flies rise in clouds as you pass. The man behind it wipes a filthy knife on his pants and smiles with teeth like tombstones. Best meat in 5 points. You don't ask best what, you just keep moving. You step carefully around a puddle that's too red to be water. No city inspector will visit here. No one cares. Mainstream records mention these markets as public health disasters. No drainage, no oversight, no standards. But historians still argue whether shutting them down would have saved lives or starved people faster. You see a woman selling candles. She's obviously remolded from stubs. They're lumpy, crooked, but they burn. That's all anyone asks. A man next to her hawks needles and thread, their rust carefully hidden in folded cloth. Across the way, an old couple shares a stall selling cracked crockery and dented spoons. They glare at anyone who lingers without buying, because they know you'll steal if you can, and they can't afford to lose even one battered plate. You see a cluster of men arguing in 3 languages over a pile of onions. One grabs an onion and runs. The others give chase, shouting. You sidestep them, heart pounding, because it's that easy to start a fight here, and that hard to finish one. You hear a baby crying? You follow the sound and see a young mother, hair matted, eyes glazed, trying to sell scraps of lace she picked from the gutter. No takers. She rocks the baby mechanically. You want to look away. You don't, because you promised yourself you'd see. You see a makeshift bar set up in the corner of the market. A man ladles something brown and steaming into tin cups. He swears it's coffee. The smell tells you otherwise. Still, there's a line. Because it's warm. Because it's something. You pass another stall selling medicines. Colored liquids in old bottles. Labels scrawled in bad English and worse spelling. Cure for all. Good for cough, gout, heartbreak. You watch as a woman buys one, handing over her last coin. She drinks it immediately, shuddering at the taste, and prays it'll help. A joke flits through your mind. 5 points pharmacy. Side effects may include death. But you don't smile, because it's not funny here. You see a boy trying to sell a single dead chicken. Feathers ragged, eyes glazed. He holds it up proudly. A man laughs and offers half a cent. The boy hesitates, then hands it over. Because half a cent is better than none. You feel your throat tighten. You force yourself to move on, because there's more to see, because you're not done yet, because this is 5 points, and no one gets to look away forever. You leave the ramshackle market behind, the shouts and haggling fading into the damp air. But the silence that replaces it is worse. Heavy, ominous, because here you see the real toll of 5 points. You see it in the hunched shapes on doorsteps, their eyes glassy with fever. In the twisted bodies laid out on threadbare cots just inside open doors, in the slow, rattling breaths of those who have no energy left to cry for help. You pause to let a rickety cart pass. It's drawn by a single tired horse, its ribs showing through filthy hair. The driver wears a battered top hat that might once have looked respectable. Now it just marks him for what he is. A coffin maker. You see the pine boxes stacked in the back, each one roughly nailed shut. No names on them, just sizes. He flicks the reins and moves on without a word. Mainstream histories tell us that 5 points suffered repeated cholera outbreaks, tuberculosis ravaging whole families, typhoid spreading like wildfire. The conditions were perfect: overcrowding, stagnant water, no sewage, no hope. But historians still argue whether the city turned a blind eye out of indifference or paralysis. You see a woman mopping at a puddle of something red on her stoop. Her face is blank, mechanical. You step carefully past. Further on, a boy sits with his back to a wall, legs splayed in the mud. His head lolls forward. At first you think he's asleep, but then you see the dried blood at the corner of his mouth. You move faster. You hear coughing everywhere. Not polite throat clearing. Deep, wet, hacking coughs that sound like they're trying to escape through the ribs. You catch a glimpse inside one room where 6 people share a single cot. 3 are children. One of them coughs so violently the others flinch, but they don't move. There's nowhere else to go. A fringe tidbit, so-called cough coffins, were a nickname for boarding houses where illness spread unchecked. Once one resident fell ill, it was only a matter of time before everyone did. You swallow hard. You watch a man pour lime into a backyard privy, trying to keep the stench down. He's cursing softly in Irish, pausing only to spit. He doesn't bother to wave you off. He knows you're not going to help. You see another man across the street vomiting in a gutter. No one stops. No one asks if he's okay. Because everyone's seen it before. They know the signs. You step carefully around a heap of rags, then realize it isn't rags at all. It's a body, covered loosely with an old coat. You flinch back, but no one else even looks, because death is as common as dirt here. You force yourself on. Mainstream accounts describe whole tenement floors being cleared by cholera in a single week. Coffin wagons rolled down these streets every morning. But historians still argue whether the city leaders did enough or if they preferred the poor to die quietly, out of sight. You hear the rumble of wagon wheels. You turn and see it. A black cart pulled by a plodding horse. Two men walk beside it, one with a ledger, the other lifting bodies into the back. There's no ceremony, no prayers, just names, if there are names at all. You watch as they lift a small shape wrapped in a gray blanket. They don't pause. They just move on to the next door. Your stomach churns. You turn away. Because what else can you do? You see a woman standing in a doorway, clutching a baby to her chest. She rocks back and forth, humming something tuneless. The baby is silent. You don't ask. You just keep moving. You hear crying from inside a building. Not one voice, many. Wailing, pleading. You hesitate at the door, but you can't make yourself go in, because you already know. There's no help here. No doctor will come, no priest except the ones too brave or too stubborn to stay away, and they can't save everyone. You step aside to let another cart pass. This one is loaded with sacks of lime, the smell sharp and cloying. You know what it's for, covering the bodies, keeping the smell down, pretending death isn't winning. A small, bitter joke flickers in your head. 5 Points funeral services, fast, cheap, anonymous. You don't even try to smile. You pass a man slumped against a wall, eyes glazed. You can't tell if he's drunk or dying. Maybe both. He blinks at you but doesn't speak. You move on. Because you have to. Because there's no room for the living to mourn the dead. Not here. Not tonight. You pass a building with black crepe tied to the door handle. Someone cared enough to mark it. Inside you hear quiet sobs. A mother, a father, a child, or all three. You don't look in. You can't, because you know you'll see your own face in theirs. You keep your eyes on the ground, stepping over puddles that gleam red and brown in the lamplight, because there's more to see. Because you're not done yet. Because 5 Points doesn't let anyone leave untouched. You try to steady yourself as you leave behind the street of death carts and fevered moaning. The fog of illness and despair hangs on your coat like a second skin. But now there's a different sound in the distance, one that doesn't belong to violence or weeping. Voices raised in song. You follow it warily, drawn despite yourself. Because 5 Points isn't only ruin, it's also redemption, or at least the stubborn dream of it. You turn a corner and see a makeshift meeting in a crumbling lot. A cluster of people gathered around a man standing on an upturned barrel, his arms spread wide. He's shouting about salvation, about deliverance, about light in the darkness, and they're listening. You step closer, blending into the edge of the crowd. His coat is threadbare, his face is lined, but his eyes blaze with certainty. He quotes scripture and shouts so loudly his voice cracks. He promises hope. Clean living. Salvation from drink and sin, a chance to start over. Mainstream histories mention these revivalist preachers and missionaries sweeping through slums like 5 Points in the 1800s. Some meant every word. Some chased donations as hard as any pickpocket chased wallets. Historians still argue whether they truly helped or just swapped one kind of control for another. But tonight, people are listening. Because there's not much else to listen to. You see women clutching babies, eyes bright with tears. Men stand with arms folded but heads bowed. Children peer from behind skirts, watching silently. The preacher points at the saloons, calls them dens of Satan. He calls out landlords who charge for squalor. Calls out politicians who buy votes with whiskey. The crowd murmurs agreement. But you see the weariness in their faces. They've heard it all before. They want to believe. They're not sure they can. You watch as another man steps up to join the preacher. He leads them in a hymn, off-key but thunderous. It rises over the ruined roofs. You stand there listening. It's the most beautiful thing you've heard all night. Because it's defiance. A stubborn refusal to be beaten. A fringe tidbit? Some reformers set up actual missions in 5 Points. Small chapels, soup kitchens, even rescue homes for women trying to leave prostitution. They were controversial, sometimes paternalistic, but for many they were the only safety net at all. You see a woman near you whispering prayers. Her lips move frantically, her eyes squeezed shut. You wonder what she's asking for. Food? Shelter? that her children survive the month. You look away. The preacher calls for repentance. He talks about temperance, leaving behind drink forever. You hear a laugh in the crowd, a harsh, hopeless bark. But the preacher doesn't stop. He points at the man, tells him he's welcome, that they all are, if they'll just believe. You see the laughing man lower his head. You wonder if he's crying. You feel something tighten in your own throat. Because in a place like this, even hollow hope is precious. You shift as the crowd starts to thin. Some wander away, shaking their heads, but others stay. They gather closer to the preacher. Ask about meetings, soup, shelter. He tells them where to go. A battered house 2 streets over, candles in the window. A sign that says, Mission. You know that place. You passed it earlier. You remember the children lined up outside, bowls in hand. You hadn't gone in, you hadn't wanted to see. Now you know you will, because you have to see everything. The preacher wipes his brow. He looks exhausted, but he keeps talking. Because he knows if he stops, the saloons win. The gangs win. The poverty wins. Mainstream accounts mention the fierce competition between these missions and the local saloons. Both offered shelter from the cold. Both offered community. One charged in coin, the other in confession. Historians still argue whether it was salvation or social control. You suspect it was both. You see the preacher step down, shoulders sagging, people clap him on the back, he nods, smiles weakly, but you see the way he stares at the ground lost in thought, because he knows he didn't save everyone tonight. He didn't even save most. But he saved someone, and that's enough to try again tomorrow. You turn away, your feet crunch over broken glass. You hear a baby cry in the distance. You hear laughter from a saloon window. You hear someone sobbing behind a door. 5 Points doesn't go quiet just because someone prayed. But it was quiet for a moment, and that matters. One last small joke you whisper to yourself, voice cracking. 5 Points ministry. Come for the soup, stay for the salvation. You don't smile, but you don't cry either. You just keep walking. Because there's more to see. Because you promised, because no one here gets to look away. You leave the prayer meeting behind, the last echoes of the hymn fading like smoke in the cold air. But the peace is short-lived. You don't make it half a block before the shouting starts. Voices raised in fury. You freeze for a second, weighing your options. But you can't help yourself. You edge closer. Because this is 5 Points. And if you want to understand it, you have to watch it fight itself. Ahead, you see 2 groups squaring off in the street. It's not a gang fight this time. No weapons yet, just fists raised, fingers jabbing, insults flying. You catch the words. Go back to Ireland. Yankee scum, stealing our jobs. Dirty foreigner. It's ugly. You see a big man in a butcher's apron shouting about real Americans. Spit flies from his mouth as he advances. A cluster of Irish immigrants stand their ground, eyes blazing, one of them gripping a heavy stick. Mainstream histories remind us of that. 5 Points was one of America's first great mixing bowls, but it wasn't harmonious. Nativist gangs like the Bowery Boys patrolled these streets, looking to stomp any immigrant who got too uppity. But historians still argue whether the tension was inevitable in such poverty or whipped up by cynical politicians looking for votes. Tonight, no one's thinking about politics. They're thinking about pride, about survival. You see a woman with a baby on her hips screaming in Gaelic. A man grabs her arm, yanking her back as another shouts at her to shut it. A young Yankee-looking boy spits in her direction. The man with her lunges. The crowd erupts. Fists connect. Someone screams. You see a bottle sail through the air, shattering against a lamppost. A baby wails in terror. You press yourself against a wall, heart hammering. You don't want to be part of this, but you can't look away. Because this is 5 Points too. This is the cost of shoving too many hungry, angry people into too little space. You see 2 older men trying to calm things down, shouting for peace. One gets knocked to the ground for his trouble. A woman shrieks as she's shoved aside. A child runs, wailing, arms flailing. The fight spills into the gutter, boots splashing in filthy water. You hear curses in English, Irish, and something that might be German. One last small joke creeps into your mind like poison. 5 Points language exchange. Learn to curse in 3 tongues before you die. You don't laugh. You move fast, because it's turning into a riot. You see someone light a torch. For a second, the flame illuminates everything. The rage, the fear, the sheer naked desperation. Then someone shouts, "Burn it down," and you decide you've seen enough of this street. You turn down an alley, heart pounding, breath ragged. But there's no escape here. The alley opens onto another street, just as crowded. But here the fight is quieter. It's the fight to live another day in a neighborhood that doesn't want you. You see signs scrawled in chalk on doorways, "No Irish need apply." You see men glaring at each other as they pass. You see women herding their kids across the street to avoid another group. Everyone here is on edge. Everyone is measuring everyone else. Mainstream accounts talk about the anti-immigrant riots that burned parts of the city, about the know-nothings preaching hate against Catholics. But historians still argue whether it was just prejudice or a scramble for scarce work that turned neighbor against neighbor. You see a cluster of men arguing at a corner. One says the Irish are ruining the neighborhood. Another says they're the only ones who'll do the worst jobs. Another mutters they should all go back where they came from. Someone points out that everyone here came from somewhere else. It almost turns into another fight. But they break apart, spitting and swearing. You slip past them. You see a boy selling papers, screaming the latest headlines: riots, fires, immigrants to blame. He doesn't care what it says. He just wants the penny. You see a saloon window smashed in, the words "Irish scum" scrawled on the broken glass. No one's bothered to clean it, because they know it'll just happen again. You step around another group of men huddled in the dark, muttering plans. They fall silent as you pass. Their eyes follow you, measuring, judging, deciding if you're friend, enemy, or mark. You nod, trying to look harmless. They look away, because tonight they have other enemies in mind. A fringe tidbit: some of the worst anti-immigrant violence in the city happened not in 5 Points, but from uptown mobs marching down here to clean out the slum. But 5 Points always fought back, always burned with its own fury. You see a man with a split lip sitting on a stoop. He's cradling his head in his hands. His friend sits beside him, arm around his shoulders, murmuring something low and soft. You don't hear the words. You don't need to. You see them both look up as another group passes. They glare, ready to fight again if needed, because there's no truce here, no safe ground, only shifting lines and temporary alliances. You keep moving, because you have to see it all, because this is 5 Points, where the American dream comes to fight itself, and everyone loses a little. You walk fast now, hoping the fighting stays behind you, but there's no real safety in 5 Points. Even the air feels sharper, like the neighborhood is watching you, judging you, because it knows why you're here. You're not part of it. You're just passing through. And that's exactly what some people came here to do, on purpose. You see them at the edge of the street, well-dressed men in top hats and ladies in bright shawls, clustered like tourists at an exotic bazaar, their eyes wide, mouths hanging open. One points at the crumbling tenement across the way, giggling like it's a zoo exhibit. You see a man next to her explaining in hushed tones, gesturing grandly at the muddy street. He's a guide. And this is the show. Slum tourism. Mainstream histories tell us that by the mid-1800s, 5 Points was infamous enough to attract visitors from uptown. The rich paid for tours to gawk at poverty, thrill at danger, and congratulate themselves on escaping it all. Historians still argue whether these tours were exploitative voyeurism or a grim kind of social awareness. You see it playing out right now. One man holds a kerchief to his nose. Another woman gasps as a ragged child darts by. "Savages," someone mutters. You feel your face heat, because you know that kid. You saw him earlier selling rags. You watch the guide point out a saloon door. "Dens of vice," he intones solemnly, voice dripping with self-importance. The group leans forward, fascinated. One woman fans herself dramatically, saying she feels faint at the very idea of going inside. But she doesn't leave, because that's not the point. The point is to see. To be seen seeing. You shift, uncomfortable, but you keep watching. because you have to see this part too. You see a street girl leaning against a doorway, arms folded, chin high. She watches them with pure contempt. One of the tourists whispers something about fallen women. Another asks the guide if they're all like that here. The guide nods, solemn. He says the place is beyond saving. You see the girl's lip curl. She spits in the gutter. Because she knows what they see, and she knows they'll do nothing. You move on, following the tour at a distance, because you want to hear it. The guide points at a tenement window, the cracked glass flickering with candlelight. He says whole families sleep in one room, that the air is foul, that they breed disease. The tourists gasp, they murmur about those people, but they don't suggest helping. They just want the story. You watch as a boy offers to shine their shoes. The guide bats him away with his cane. "Don't touch them," he says sharply. The boy scowls, melting back into the shadows. You see another woman snap open her coin purse and drop a penny at a girl's feet. She says it's charity. She says it's doing her part. She doesn't wait to see if the girl picks it up, because she doesn't actually care. She's done her good deed. Time to move on. You catch a phrase from the guide. They choose this life. You feel your stomach twist, because you know better. You've seen the hunger, the cold, the fear. No one chooses this. You see one of the men in the tour glance nervously at a pair of tough-looking locals watching from a stoop. He asks if it's safe. The guide assures him it is, so long as they stay with him. Because he's paid off the right people. Mainstream fact? Some tours literally hired local gang members as protection, turning the threat into part of the attraction. A fringe tidbit? Some gangs even ran the tours themselves, splitting the profits with saloon owners and landlords. You see the guide start leading them back toward Paradise Square, promising them a glimpse of the real 5 Points. You hang back, because you're not part of them. You're not here to gawk. Or at least, you tell yourself that. But you're still watching. Still taking it all in, and you wonder what that makes you. One small joke crawls into your mind, sour as rot. 5 Points tours, fun for the whole superior family. But it dies on your tongue, because there's no humor in watching someone else's misery sold as entertainment. You see the tourists glance back one last time before disappearing around the corner. Faces pale, eyes wide, voices hushed. They'll go back uptown and tell the story. They'll dine out on it. Oh, you wouldn't believe how they live down there. They'll clutch their pearls. They'll thank God for their clean parlors and safe streets, and nothing will change, because the people they watched will still be here tomorrow, selling scraps, stealing food, dying young. You let out a shaky breath. You look around at the street, suddenly quieter. The locals eye you warily, because they know what you are, an outsider, a witness, maybe even a tourist. You swallow hard. You want to say you're different, but are you? You shake your head, you keep moving, because there's more to see. Because you promised yourself you wouldn't turn away. Because if you're going to look, you better really see it all. Even this. You don't follow the tour group. You let them vanish around the corner, their voices fading like a bad memory. Instead, you turn the other way, deeper into the tangle of alleys. The street narrows, walls closing in like the throat of a trap. But even here, you see movement, a glow of candlelight behind filthy glass. A battered sign creaks in the breeze, its letters flaking, but just legible enough. Mission House. You hesitate, but you push the door open. Inside, it's warmer. Not much, but enough. The smell is different too. Still damp, still heavy with unwashed bodies, but layered over with the sharp scent of carbolic soap and boiled beans. You stand there a moment, blinking, because you're not sure what you expected. But it wasn't this. Rows of cots line the walls, most of them occupied by figures wrapped in blankets that have seen better days. A thin woman in a gray dress moves between them with a tin cup, offering water. She glances at you but doesn't pause, because she's busy, because there's no one to waste on a gawker. You move aside to let her pass. Further in, you see a makeshift kitchen, a barrel cut open for a stove, a huge pot bubbling with watery soup. A man with soot on his face ladles it into chipped bowls. A line of children snakes toward him, bowls in hand. They don't talk, they wait. When they get their portion, they scuttle away to the corners to eat, hunched over their meals like dogs guarding bones. You exhale slowly, because you're seeing something 5 Points rarely offers. Relief. Not escape. Not salvation. Just a pause. Mainstream histories mention these missions as sanctuaries, but also as weapons in a moral war. They demanded prayer, temperance, obedience. But they also gave food, warmth, a place to sleep. Historians still argue whether they truly saved lives or just enforced middle-class values on the poor. You watch a man stagger in, clothes wet from rain. He slumps by the door. The woman in gray approaches. She offers him a cup. He refuses at first, then takes it with shaking hands. You see his eyes close as he drinks. You realize you're holding your breath, because you were waiting to see if she'd push him. Tell him to pray, beg for forgiveness, but she just gives him the cup and moves on. You see a corner where another volunteer kneels with a cluster of kids, Kat reading from a small battered Bible. Her voice is gentle. The kids shift restlessly, only half listening. But they don't leave. Because it's warm. Because someone is talking to them like they matter. You step closer. You hear words about forgiveness, about redemption, about a kingdom where no one starves. You feel your throat tighten because it's a nice dream. You move on because you want to see it all. In another corner, you see two men arguing quietly. One says the mission is too soft, that it should turn away drunks and thieves. The other says that's the point, that anyone can be saved, that even 5 Points deserves mercy. A fringe tidbit? Some missions ran moral suasion campaigns, inviting drunks in for food but requiring them to sit through sermons first. Others refused any strings at all. The debate raged for decades. You see the woman in gray return to the pot, stirring it carefully. She ladles a portion for herself last. She eats standing up, watching the door. You realize she's waiting for the next lost soul to stumble in. You wonder how many she's seen die. You wonder why she keeps doing it. You want to ask, but you don't, because you're not sure you want to hear the answer. Instead, you watch her clean a bowl with water that's barely warm. She hands it to the next child in line without complaint. You see the way the child's eyes dart around as if expecting someone to steal it. But no one does, because here, at least for tonight, there's enough. You step back toward the door, suddenly needing air. Outside, the wind hits you like a slap. You gulp it down, heart hammering, because it's easier to breathe out here, but colder too. You turn and see the mission sign swinging, the candle in the window guttering, but not going out. One small joke flickers in your head, bitter as cheap gin. 5 Points Luxury Inn, no beds, no heat, no judgment. You don't laugh, but you do smile, because it's the closest thing to kindness you've seen all night. You take one last look at the door. You wonder who'll go in next. You wonder who'll survive because of it. You hope someone will. Then you turn and keep walking, because there's more to see. Because 5 Points doesn't let anyone forget what it is. Not even the people trying to save it. Especially them. You pull your coat tighter against the wind as you step away from the mission house. The door swings shut behind you with a tired creak. The candle in the window flickers once more, then steadies, stubborn as the people inside. You keep going. The street is quieter now. Not safe, just drained. Like a boxer who's taken too many hits to keep swinging. You see boarded windows, sagging roofs, plaster crumbling like stale bread. 5 Points is dying. But it refuses to admit it. You hear scraps of sound, a baby's thin wail, a distant cough, the clop of a lone cart. But the shouts, the laughter, even the fights, they're fading, because people are leaving, if they can. Mainstream histories say the worst of 5 Points began to clear by the late 1800s. New waves of immigrants moved in and out. Reformers demolished whole blocks. Developers saw potential in land once thought cursed. But historians still argue whether the neighborhood really improved, or if poverty just moved elsewhere. Wearing a cleaner coat. You see evidence of that argument in every broken step you take. Ahead of you, a building leans so far over the street it seems to defy physics. Someone's nailed boards across the door. A sign scrawled in chalk reads, "Condemned." But you see movement behind a cracked curtain. because no one really leaves if they can't afford to. You walk past a stoop where 3 old women sit in silence. Their faces are lined like maps of grief. They watch you with eyes that don't bother pretending hope anymore. You nod. They don't nod back, because what's the point? Further on, you see a man hauling a trunk. He stops to rest, wiping sweat on his sleeve. 2 children trail him, clutching rags that serve as dolls. They're leaving. You hear him mutter to himself, "Brooklyn's better." He doesn't sound convinced. You step aside to let them pass. The little girl turns to look at you. Her eyes are huge, empty. You don't wave, you just watch them go. Because what else can you do? You see another building with smashed windows, no light inside, no voices, just a black maw waiting to swallow anything foolish enough to wander in. You hurry past. You see a saloon door swinging, half off its hinges. No music, no laughter, just an empty bar lined with empty bottles. The barkeep snores behind the counter, because even Vice gets tired. A fringe tidbit. Some reformers believed clearing 5 points would save the city's soul. They tore down Paradise Square, built new streets, put up tenements with rules about ventilation, plumbing, decency, but people still slept 6 to a room, still starved, still died young. You see it here. A man sits on a curb, his head in his hands. Next to him is a battered suitcase. You hear him whispering, "Anywhere's better, anywhere." But he doesn't get up, he just keeps whispering. You keep moving, because you have to see. You pass an old church, its steeple cracked, bell gone. The door hangs open, revealing dust and broken pews. Someone's tried to sweep it, but gave up halfway. A single candle burns near the altar. You step inside for a moment. The air is cool, smells of mold and old prayers. You see initials carved into the pews, dates, names, people trying to say "I was here." You trace one with your finger, then back away, because this place isn't for you, not anymore. Outside again, the wind cuts sharper. You pull your collar up. You see another cart rolling slowly down the street. This one isn't full of bodies. It's full of furniture, tables, chairs, mattresses. Someone's moving out, or moving in. Because 5 points doesn't stay empty, it just changes hands. One last joke tries to bubble up. 5 points real estate, buy low, sell never. You choke it back. Because there's no laughter left in you tonight. You pause at the corner of Cross and Anthony. You remember Paradise Square. Now it's gone, replaced by straight lines, respectable buildings, clean bricks. You squint and try to see it as it was. The crowds, the fights, the music, the sermons, the filth, the life. But it's slipping away, even as you watch. Because 5 points is dying, because the city is killing it on purpose, because it has to. You feel something cold and sad settle in your chest. Because you know it won't really die. It'll just move to another street, another block, another name. Because poverty doesn't vanish, it just migrates. It always finds a new 5 points. You swallow hard, you turn to leave, your boots scrape the cobbles, you hear someone cough behind you, you don't turn around. Because there's nothing you can do tonight, except remember, except see, except tell it true. You take one last look over your shoulder. The street is empty, but you know better. It's never really empty. It's just waiting. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly, watching it plume in the cold air. The street is quieter now. So quiet you can hear the wind rattling loose shutters like old bones. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because you don't want to miss anything. Because you promised you'd see it all, and this is the last of it. Ahead you spot a single lamp glowing in a window, defiant against the darkness. The glass is cracked. The flame flickers wildly every time the wind sneaks in. But it doesn't go out, like the people who've lived here. Beaten, bent, never quite broken. You move on. The ground under your boots is wet and slick. You step carefully, but you can't avoid the mud that sucks at your soles, threatening to pull you down. Kind of poetic, you think. 5 points has always been good at that, pulling people down. You pass what used to be a boarding house. The door is missing entirely, and the inside is black as a grave. You remember earlier, those cots packed so close people had to sleep shoulder to shoulder. The sour stench of unwashed bodies and dying breath. Now it's silent. Empty, or maybe not. Maybe someone's inside, curled in a corner, trying to stay warm. You don't check. Because some things you've seen enough of tonight. You keep going. Ahead, a man stands against a wall, coat buttoned up to his chin. He's not moving, not even smoking, just staring at nothing. You nod as you pass. He doesn't react. Because here, everyone is an island. Even packed this tight. Especially packed this tight. Mainstream history says that by the end of the century, they started tearing these streets down, making them respectable, laying clean new avenues over the filth, building something better. But historians still argue whether that saved the city or just pushed the misery somewhere else. You think you know the answer. Because you've walked these streets tonight, you've seen too much to believe in easy fixes. You step over a broken barrel, its staves sticking up like jagged teeth. A dog growls from the shadows. You don't flinch. You're used to being watched now. You hear laughter in the distance, forced, brittle, a last gasp of the night's defiance. You don't turn toward it, because you know it's not joy, it's survival. You pause at an alley mouth. You can see all the way down, a thin silver thread of moonlight catching the slick cobbles. It's empty, but you remember the fights you saw there. The kids picking through refuse, the drunks slumped against walls, the way people turned their heads to avoid seeing. You didn't turn away. You think that counts for something. Not much, but something. You step on. You see a woman emerge from a doorway, hair loose around her face, eyes heavy with exhaustion. She's not young. She's not old. She's timeless in that way only suffering can be. She adjusts her shawl, lifts her chin, and starts walking the other way. You don't say anything. Because what would you say? You both know the truth. This place eats hope for breakfast, and somehow spits people out anyway, still breathing. A fringe tidbit? Reformers once calculated how many people lived in a single block here and claimed it was denser than parts of Calcutta. But they missed the real measure. Not bodies. Stories. You've seen them tonight, heard them in every cough, every curse, every whispered prayer. You move past a corner where a preacher once shouted about salvation. It's empty now. No hymns, no pleas, just the wind. You step around a pile of refuse. It's not even trying to be a barricade, just an offering to the city's hunger. You hear water dripping from a cracked gutter. You smell damp wood rot and something metallic. Blood? Could be. You don't check, because you know what you'd find. You keep walking. You see one last child watching you from a stoop. Eyes too old. Mouth too thin. You want to say something, but you don't, because there's nothing left to say. You just nod. They don't nod back. They just keep watching, and you walk on, because it's the end of the night, because there's nowhere else to go. You step out of 5 Points, but you know you're not leaving it behind. You'll carry it with you, in your coat that stinks of privies and cheap gin, in your boots caked with unnameable filth, in your head, full of ghosts you can't forget. Because that's the deal. You can visit for a night, but you don't get to forget. Not if you were really here. Not if you really saw. So you keep walking, one foot in front of the other, and you don't look back, because you don't need to. You saw enough, more than enough, and maybe tomorrow you'll tell someone about it. Maybe you'll help, or maybe you'll just remember. Either way, it matters. Because tonight you walk these streets. You felt the cold, smelled the rot, heard the cries, and you didn't look away. That's worth something, even here. Especially here. Now your steps slow, your breathing evens. The wind calms around you like a gentle sigh. The lamplight fades to a dull glow behind your eyelids, and even the harshest cries of the slum seem softened by distance. You're safe now. No more running from gangs or stepping over sickness. No more watching flames consume the night or hearing the dull thud of fists in the dark. All you hear is your own quiet breathing. Imagine that last candle in the mission window, its stubborn little flame steady in the hush. That single small promise that even in the worst places a little light survives. Hold on to that. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. Let the tension in your chest slowly dissolve. There's nothing left to see tonight. Nothing left to prove. You did it. You walked every broken street, smelled every foul corner, met every tired, determined face, and now you get to rest. Feel the weight of your body sink into your bed. Feel the pillow cradle your head. Let your eyes drift shut if they haven't already. It's over. For tonight at least. You're warm, you're safe, and tomorrow is another day. A better day. A quieter day. So sleep. Sleep deeply. Sleep knowing you saw it all. And you didn't look away. Sweet dreams.